Do you ever feel like marriage is not the right thing for entrepreneurs, that you don't have a supportive spouse, partner? In this episode, we're going to be diving into all this and more. Super excited to talk with the boys. Welcome to the show.
What up, what up? Feels
Let's
good.
Let's go. So all three of us are married?
Yes.
So Levi, how long have you been married?
Almost 2 years now.
Nice.
So a lot less than you guys.
Long time.
You guys are really old.
Dude, I'm approaching 19 years this fall.
Wow.
And I think Daryl's approaching 18.
18, yep.
Crazy. I remember when Daryl got married.
I can remember. I didn't go to your marriage.
Yeah.
Wedding?
No. Yeah, you guys remember my wedding, right?
Oh, yeah. Jeez, that was
Weird.
messed up.
Yeah, that's odd.
So we're gonna dive into kind of some of the pain points. You know, as an entrepreneur, we're super focused on building our businesses, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got a lot on your plate. You got employees depending on you. You got your spouse or your partner depending on some sort of paycheck that's coming from it. A lot of times when you first start off a business, it's money out, time, which causes a lot of strain.
Yeah.
You know, it's something interesting. So yesterday we were talking about, this is going to be a little tangent, but I was riding my dirt bike this morning, and I started thinking about how yesterday we were talking about how entrepreneurs never give themselves permission to like go big, right? Or they struggle with it. Some do, lots don't. And a lot of times we're looking for permission from other people to break those levels or those walls down. But I feel like a common thread is entrepreneurs give themselves permission to be stressed out and to put so much burden on themselves and give them, oh, I've got all these employees that count on me. I've got this, I've got that, right? It's really easy as an entrepreneur to put so much pressure on yourself. And what does that impact most? Your relationships, right? So I think that kind of ties into this is how one of the key factors of being really solid mentally is like, don't stress the big things because it starts to impact everything. But like Chris is saying, employees, bills, payroll. I mean, I can remember when I thought, $100,000 every 2 weeks was a big payroll. And then we got up to, it was like 2 million, and it just kept climbing. And it was fascinating to think how many people depend on the business. But the reality is like, it's if you have good culture, if you have a good structure, like everyone's in it together and you can solve a lot of problems and do a lot with the right people.
Yeah.
Let's take it back to the relationships, because I think that's probably one of the things that everybody has some level of relationship, whether you're married, you're dating, you're single and want to be married or dating, right? Like everybody desires companionship. So how do you balance that with running a business, building an empire, right? Like this is a question I get all the time, right? Because and I'm sure if Daryl was more out there on social media, he'd get the same type of question, right?
Yeah.
Both been married for a long time, have several kids. I have 5. Daryl has 4. Levi still trying to figure it out.
One day, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
someday soon.
So they're made by doing laundry together. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I guess, so let me ask you, Chris, have you ever created rules with your wife that you feel helped create space for you in business, but yet maybe the right kind of environment at home? Were there ever rules that you guys created to?
Well, here's the reality is
other?
like over 19 years, we've had lots of ups and downs. So to generally say yes, that I've had these rules, like, no, like we've struggled through where there's been good expectations, where we've had these rules, or other times where I'm just running rampant. And luckily I have a really supportive wife that's chosen to hang on. Right. And probably certain times that I didn't deserve her to hang on or stick with me throughout the thing. And so like, I mean, I think back to like my first business, I was a piece of crap, I was so focused on my business, my friends, looking good, very egotistical. We were just having our second child, Caden, and my wife was home alone, like dealing with it. And we never had good come to Jesus moments during that time. It was just like she was dealing with the stress and postpartum depression and everything else. And I was out having a good time, having fun. I'd be going to Vegas with some of the boys on the weekend or whatever else, and I look back and I was just like, man, that was a piece of crap, And so, I think the key as we've gotten better is what you're saying, right? Like having these rules of engagement and what we can expect from each other. The most important thing that's ever worked for us is communication. When we're communicating, things are good. When we're not, we're not.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I think just like anything, it's setting proper expectations. Like what season, I've seen people do it better than me. And usually it's when they set good expectations around a season. Like, hey, I'm in this season of work, right? This is startup season. This is what you can expect from me. You can expect that I'm going to be gone 6 days a week, 8 to 8, and outside of that, I'm there to help. But inside of that, type thing.
I'm glad that we're talking about this because I feel like in entrepreneurship and building a business and everything, the relationship piece is something that I think is almost taboo to talk about.
Right.
Like we're always talking about how to build a successful business, how to scale, how to this, that, and the other. But a huge piece of that, I think a lot of motivation for a lot of entrepreneurs is they want to build a life for their future, for their current family, generations to come later.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times, I think at the very beginning, you're thinking of unselfish things probably, but it's really easy to say that and get caught up of like, you start fighting with your spouse because like you guys said, you're putting a strain on money, on time, and everything like that. How do you guys attack that where from maybe your partner's perspective of you're being selfish, you get to go to Vegas on the weekends, you're working your dream job, you're living your dream life, and I'm here trying to support and put all the pieces together. How do you guys deal with that? I mean, you guys have had to, I'm sure, deal with that multiple times.
So I'll tell you how not to deal with it.
Yeah.
So like when the negative times in my career has just been like, my wife would be like, hey, yeah, you get to go and do this, this, and this. And the way I would throw it back on her is just like, well, you want me to go get a normal job? Right? Like, do you want me to go and be a garbage man or a school teacher, hate my life? And although true, right? Like, although that is the reality, right? Like, is that what she really wants? Like, that's not the right way to approach it. It's saying, look, I know it's going back to expectations. I know what I do is going to be viewed as not work. These are the things that I need to invest in relationships. This is why it's worth it in the long run. We're going to suffer a little bit right here. You may look at what I'm doing. And, I think me and Daryl have had points in our careers where, because we've talked about this a lot, like where we don't necessarily tell our spouses when we have a lot of fun, right? Like where it's like, okay, it's probably better if I just don't let her know that I went to Top Golf while I was down in Vegas. Or, I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but there's been certain times where just like managing the emotions of a spouse has been like, I don't necessarily share absolutely everything. I mean, if she asked me, of course, but I don't know. What's the right thing? What's worked for you, Daryl?
So one of the things when we first started talking, I thought about was setting a good expectation in certain events. So I remember knocking doors. I remember one of the rules that we had was don't call me during the day.
Yep.
And that was established right from the very beginning because I'd rather be talking to my wife or home than knocking doors, right? And so, I think what was great about that was I identified how our relationship actually hurt me, right? It would distract me from what I needed to do or my responsibilities. And setting up that rule, she understood, I understood it, and there's never an issue. And if she called me, I'd answer it absolutely every time because I knew she was calling me for a reason. So that was just like a simple rule. But a few years later, I heard this story about a doctor who, he's a surgeon, he's stressed out at work, and he comes home, and he would figuratively take off his jacket and hang it out outside his house. And I love that story because a lot of times we have a hard day. We can go home with all that stress and just release it on our family, on our kids and our spouse. And so one of the most powerful things I feel like I've been able to do is realize I can come home as a completely new person. No matter what I experience, I can come home with full of energy and excitement, regardless of how crappy my day was. Or if my day was really great, take that excitement and energy and bring it home and share it with everyone at home. And so that's taken practice, and I'm not perfect at it, but it's probably one of the most powerful things because I feel like I want my wife when I come home to be excited I'm home. I want my kids when I come home to be excited I'm home. And I could have easily made it, painful for them so that they felt, oh, dad's got a lot of stuff going on or whatever. I hate when my kids say that. I don't want my kids to say that because I want who I show up at the home to be different than who I am at work. I want those, if there's negative things, I want them to be separate.
Have you guys ever gotten a reality check, from your spouse or your partner? Where
All the time.
Where maybe you thought you were doing what was right, or, you think that you're being unselfish, but really maybe you're ego driven or something in that ballpark where your partner, your spouse gave you a reality check and you're like, holy cow. Like, yeah, I need to pivot.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of different times. I've had several different pivots in my career. I would say there a few different things that have really helped me. One, I read a book called Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Group. That really helped me value my spouse even more and put more focus on her. It's interesting. I love my wife, Andrea, so much, and I value her opinion so much, so that when she says things, it really cuts me deep. Yeah, in fact, I can go back to the one and only time that I've ever had a panic attack in my life. And for those that haven't experienced a panic attack, it's wild. Have you, either of you guys ever had a panic attack?
Yeah, it feels like the world is crashing down.
Literally the worst feeling in the world. Like, you feel like it happened this one night. Me and my wife were having an argument in bed, and it was like more just like her giving me a reality check of like, this is what you suck at, and all these other things, and which cut real deep. And like the feeling when you go through a panic attack is like that, like the world is literally caving in. I felt like I was falling through my bed, like into eternity of death. Like it was the weirdest thing. So it sounds like you've experienced one.
It's dark.
It is
it's dark. You can't breathe. It's just like, it's everything wrong.
And so I remember doing like this breathing exercise to try to get through that. But like, but yeah, like there's times like that always. And anybody that's pretending that they have it all figured out is full of crap. And like, even Daryl talking about like, hey, you put off your coat and whatnot. Like in theory, it's great. And when I do those things, and there's been times when I've been really good at that, right? Like put my phone away, lock it up in the case safe or whatever else, right? Like those are great. But the hard thing about hard things or building an empire, a business, is like, it's not just black and white, right? Like there are a lot of times where I go home and I am distracted and I am going and getting on my computer or my phone or thinking about how to improve my business or whatnot. And so it's like creating boundaries is a great rule, and saying compartmentalizing of like, okay, this is my life and this is my workout and this is my time with my family and everything else. But like, frankly, like the thing that's worked best for me is constant check-ins, because if I don't constantly check in with my wife from a standpoint of like, okay, how are we doing? How has the last week, the last month, the last quarter, the last year been going? I always, as somebody who's obsessed with building businesses, will creep back to that, to the distraction, to the different things like that. And so, like, although I am not perfect in my relationship, the check-ins help check me back, and that's what has worked best for my relationship.
One of the things I've noticed is when I have when my relationship is strong with my wife, how I show up at work is so much more productive. I'm so much more focused, creative. I think there's a real significance of being married and what, like, the energy and what you offer each other, that's not really tangible or easy to see. And so I feel like taking care of my wife is taking care of myself. I think there's just this reflection of what you're becoming. And I think for a short period of time, you can have success and destroy your relationships, but I think it impacts you eventually. Eventually, you're sitting there thinking, like, I don't enjoy the business, I don't enjoy these things, and that's because you've destroyed what's actually probably more valuable in life, which is the relationships that are closest to you.
Are you a home service business owner struggling to get your time back? Maybe you're feeling like you have to do everything yourself, or maybe you aren't able to break through that certain revenue plateau. You feel like owning your business isn't quite what you thought it would be. Am I right? I understand you more than you know. I've launched many businesses throughout my life, and I was lucky enough to have built multiple businesses that scaled to 2 9-figure exits. But more importantly, I have had even more businesses fail. Why would that be more important? I learned a ton from each venture that I was a part of, each teaching me lessons about how to hire the right people, how to price my product, how to build out proper SOPs, and even building the right culture. These lessons are what led me to being able to sell my most recent business for nearly $200 million. Why am I sharing all this with you? Because I've been in your shoes, feeling the same exact feelings that you are. And if I knew back then what I know now, life might have been a lot easier for me. Unfortunately, I can't travel back in time, but I can help you so that you don't have to. How? I package everything that I learned into over 150 videos all about my wins and mistakes that I've made in business over the years. And I want to give you access to these videos, but it's so much more than just a bunch of videos. I've created a community of home professionals just like you where people interact and share ideas with each other. Plus, we host live calls every single week where you get direct access to people like myself and my business partners that were a part of these different ventures who are experts in marketing, operations, software, and even more. All you have to do is book a free call with one of our team members to see if this would be a good fit for you. That way, I can help you take your business to the next level, making you a next level home pro. And the reality is like the only way you're going to make any type of relationship work is you have to share values. You don't have to share common interests. You don't have to like enjoy being and doing the same things all the time or whatnot. But like the only reason mine and my wife's relationship has thrived is because we value the same things. We both value God. We both value family. We both value like principles around our family and raising good kids and those type of things. But like, man, if we did not share those things, there's a lot of crap that we bash heads on, right? Like, and there are only a handful of activities that we like even love doing together. Yeah. Like we love doing golf. We love golfing, which is awesome. That's been like one of like my favorite things that I've found out in the last few years is that we enjoy doing that. We're both committed to our relationship from a standpoint of like, even when we really don't like each other. 'Cause one of the things that I always say with my wife is like, we'll always love each other, right? Now the question is, do I like her? Do I dislike her in the moment? Right. And so like one of the best compliments that we give to each other is like, hey, I like you. I really like you right now. And so, cause like I said, we're committed. We love each other. We want to be there, but like the best practices that have helped keep those things together is like, we go on a date every Friday night, right? Like we try to sacrifice everything else possible. I tell my kids, like, this is mom's night. This is everything else. Like, even when we don't like each other, right? Even when we're bashing heads or like, we're holding back on sex or whatever else, right? Like that leads to these argumentative, like we go and we commit to those times together and we make it work. And I think like those are some of the most important things is that you're just committed to each other and you share common values.
I think something I'm still learning, but something I have learned with my relationship with my wife is well, from reality checks that I've gotten, I'm kind of like you, Chris, where my wife's, when she says something to me, it's the only person in the entire world that'll actually emotionally affect me because I care so much about what she thinks of me.
Yep.
And me, I would consider myself like a romantic. I like to go above and beyond. I like to be creative and do the crazy dates and think of cool presents and whatever. And a lot of the times I've learned that love is not shown by the birthdays or the Christmases or what you do on an anniversary or these big illustrious things, but it's how you wake up to each other every morning, how you greet each other when you get home, how you react when you guys share feelings. Like these little things every day is actually what the love is, not the fancy flowers that you buy on anniversaries and stuff like that. Do you guys feel like through your guys' relationships in your years that you've been caught up in, well, I did this for you, why can't you just see this from me at all? When reality, the relationship just needs some nurturing, some of the little things.
Yeah, that usually never works. So yeah, I'll get caught up in that for about 5 minutes before I realize I'm a retard and don't know what I'm saying or doing. But yeah, it's I was thinking about like when we started Soul Gen, I was living in Utah, and then I was traveling up here, living up here. My wife had just had a baby, which is really odd because I feel like almost every baby we've had, I've been starting a new business in a new location. It's the craziest thing. My wife was having a lot of struggle at the time, taking care of our fourth child, being home alone, just had the baby. So it was a challenging time for her. And I can remember, thinking like, man, okay, how do I surprise her? And at the time, like me doing the dishes was like not a thing. And I thought, you know what, I gotta figure out how to surprise her without her knowing. So, it'd be like going and doing the dishes and having them done so that she didn't see me doing the dishes. They were just done type of thing, or cleaning a room or whatever. And it was really fascinating for me because something that I hated doing, I found enjoyment doing it because I changed my reasons or my whys behind it. And I think that's an important aspect of a relationship is, why are you doing those things? Are you doing those things because you have to? Or are you doing those things because you want, your spouse to be surprised? You want them to feel, some type of gratification or acknowledgement for who they are and what they mean to you. So it's really interesting. The why behind what you do. You can give a gift and it can mean nothing, and you can give the same gift and it can mean a lot. And it all comes down to, why did you do it?
Yeah. So the second anything becomes transactional, we'll kill it. Right. And so like to Daryl's point, right, like what the why is, like if you're given a gift so that she gives you some sort of response, whether to that she's happy, which fulfills your ego or your need. Like whenever it's centered on you, it's the wrong reason. Right? Like if you vacuum or do the dishes or clean the house so that you can get sex, dude, that is the worst reason, right? Like, or even so that you can make her feel good to feel good about yourself. Yeah. Also the wrong reason, right? Like whenever it is self-ego, self-fulfilling, it is always, and they can feel it. They know it and they understand it. And that's one thing I've really started to understand about relationships lately is like, I've got to do it for her benefit and her benefit only. Like if I see that she needs something and I do it because I want her to be happy, that's a win, right? Like even if it means I don't get sex, it doesn't make me happy, it doesn't benefit me in any type of way, but it only benefits her, that is an act of true love, right? It's like I think Christ is probably like the best example of just like selfless acts of service that did not benefit him in any way, shape, or form. Like that's the kind of love that we have to show our spouse. And the cool thing is like if you can just give without expectation of receiving ever, that's when you begin to receive, right? Like it reciprocates, and you always bring, one of the pieces of advice that I was given is like, a lot of times we look at a relationship as like, okay, we've got to make it equal 100, right? I bring 50, you bring 50. I bring 60, you bring 40, whatever else, right? Now, yes, it should, if the goal is 100, but you've got to be always willing to bring 100, right? Like without expectation of receiving anything in return, right? And so like if you can always bring that full effort, anything that you get in return is just like an added bonus.
One of the things I heard, because me and my wife will do different like relationship courses. We've done seminars. We've done like the Tony Robbins stuff, which has been awesome. We've done a meditation conference with Joe Dispenza. There's like this online course that GFF. And so, one of the things I heard early on in our marriage was like working on your relationship is not because you have problems, but it's because of what you're trying to grow or create. And it's the same as if like health, right? If you wait till you're sick before you start taking measures to become healthy,
or until you're 400 pounds before you
you have so many problems. It's so hard. And so I also think like one of the advices I'd give is like always be working on your relationship. Like it's something that matters the most. Doing courses on, if you don't see eye to eye on finance, do a course that you guys can do together on finance. If you don't see eye to eye on raising kids, or if you do, like improve on how you raise your kids.
Yes.
One of the things we studied was how do we start talking to our kids about like sex and all that stuff? At what age, and how do you talk to them? And my wife had most of the conversation, but she learned how to talk to them in a way that was like very, very cool. It's like easy to talk to our kids. And now we have a very open dialogue about all the stuff going on because they hear it and see it, right? It's just whether they talk to you about it or they don't. And there's a lot goes on in a marriage, finance. You have kids, you have to like help your kids grow up in this world, which is challenging. You've got your social circles of usually an element of spirituality or religion. You have your health. Our health, I think, reflects a lot through our spouses. How
you got to balance masculine and feminine energies.
Yep.
Like from both are bringing a yin and yang to it. That's one thing I've been studying a lot lately is masculine and feminine energies. Like it's impossible to not have both in the relationship, and both the man and the woman will bring different levels of masculine and feminine energies to the table, which is...
Chris, let me tell you something I've never told you.
What? Tell me.
So this lady was talking about, it's called shadow work. So what shadow work is it's like parts of you that you don't like, or like, not that you don't like, but essentially you don't like them. So an example would be if there's someone that irritates you, right? Or triggers you, right? It's usually a reflection of something inside yourself that you're not okay with. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And when you can start to understand it, you can change that relationship you have with yourself and improve it. So as I was going through this, what was super fascinating, right? The two people that I feel like can like emotionally set me off the most are Chris and my wife.
Let's go, baby.
Right? Here was the fascinating thing. The things that drive me nuts about Chris, I do to my wife. And the things that drive me nuts about my wife, I do to Chris. And so like I could see how like it was a reflection of myself and how I did those things. That's why it bothers me. I'll give you an example if this doesn't make sense. If you're super self-conscious about how much you weigh, okay? When you're in a room, you're going to notice or think about the weight of other people. Or maybe you're self-conscious about your hairstyle or that you're losing your hair, something like that. You're going to pay attention to people's hair, right? And so what's really cool is you can do a lot of self-work on yourself by identifying what is it that triggers me about my spouse or about my partner or about my kids. And it's usually something inside you. if you're very confident in your health, you do not care about how people, you're never looking at someone like, oh, that person's fat or they're this or they're that. Like, you just don't. It just doesn't come to your mind, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's something that bugs you about yourself or you're self-conscious, right? Maybe it's I'm working out every day, so I'm very conscious of like how I feel, how much muscle mass I have. I'm going to pay attention to people's definition of muscle and how big they are and all this other stuff.
It's similar to like if you hate on somebody for being rich, it's because you feel like you're poor.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. So anyways, what was fascinating was just how reflective, as I'm doing this work, as like, she didn't point it out, I just like saw it. I'm like, my gosh, it was just weird, the relationship between Chris and my wife, and how like you both like receive and give the like kind of the flow of some of these things. It was fascinating.
I'm glad that you're talking about comparison, because it brought me to maybe something that might be controversial. I don't know. I'm curious in your guys' thoughts on it. So as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of us have like squirrel syndrome, right? We're always chasing the new nut, whether it's in business and life, whatever it might be. And I think a lot of times, especially if you're building a business, you're focusing on a lot of the problems that are going on in your business. And I'm sure that seeps into relationships as well. Like, you're probably seeing all of the problems and highlighting that. I think a lot of the times is you start to compare, like you're kind of talking about, where maybe you think your relationship is 80% good. You start looking at other relationships, maybe even other people, and seeing, oh, they have the 20% that I'm missing. Oh, yeah. And you start chasing that or spending more time there or whatever it might be, when in reality, in an extreme example, if you left your partner to go find that 20%, you realize, oh, well, they had the 20%, but they're missing the other 80.
Absolutely.
What are you guys' thoughts on that? How to deal with that? Or
I think one of the most impactful things to mine and my wife's relationship is understanding the dynamics of personality, right? And so we've done a lot of work around the DISC assessment. We've done a lot of work around the Enneagram, human design, all these different things, just to better understand each other and the way that we complement each other, right? And so, like, example, we've talked about on previous episodes, the DISC assessment, right? I'm a high D, high I. She is a high C, low S. Or so she's a high C, high S, low I, right? And so we are exact opposite. We complement each other, right? And as I've shared before, there's no such thing as perfect people. There's only perfect couples, perfect teams, perfect organizations. And so understanding that our strengths and weaknesses balance out each other and allow us to go and be very, right? And so, like, although she, to your example, may go and look at somebody that is a high C or high S as very awesome, right? Like, they're like her or whatever else, right? The unequal of balance actually wouldn't complement her or whatnot. And so we begin to appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of each other, right? Like, the fact that my ability to make decisions and her indecisiveness, right, complement and help each other and help us form this great relationship. Whenever you study relationships, study Enneagram or study these different type of things, you begin to realize, like, having weaknesses is actually a good thing, and having, and having different levels of strength, complementary strengths, is actually a really good thing. And then you just appreciate each other so much more for what you bring to the table.
Going along with this, I had this thought that kids operate the same way. So, like, I feel like if you took my girls and put them all together as one person, you'd have like the perfect person. And I think that's because there's a balance that just naturally happens whenever you group people together. And I think that's what our kids are, right? Our kids do the same thing, where like you have these different traits among them, but together they're like the perfect individual, right? And they just experience things differently because they kind of cover different aspects of the human experience or whatnot. And one of the things is, like, you cannot make your kids all be the same person. Like, that's not a thing, right? If you've raised kids, you realize how different each of them are. I think marriage is no different, right? Trying to be the same person as your spouse is like, it's an impossibility. And you probably would get pretty bored if that was the case of looking at yourself and being the same person. And so, it's interesting because you do go through this transition where it's like, you realize you're very, very different. And it's like, okay, are those differences what make us stronger or what make us weaker? And I believe they can do either one. And so I think what's really powerful is understanding how differences can make you stronger, because you can use the same focus and acknowledge that differences can make you weaker. And some people choose that and they don't figure out how to like come together, but just how to come apart. And, I think like anything that's balanced, you have the spectrum, you have opposites. And I think that's what's powerful about as you age. This is what I think. As you age, you start to realize more and more of these differences, and they either bring you closer together and stronger, or they separate you. And you see a lot of people get divorces and stuff because they don't know how to connect anymore, because they use those to separate versus to become stronger. And I think that, the saddest thing is to see couples that are great people separate because they lose that understanding or clarity of how powerful they can make each other.
What, for your guys' partners, wives, how do you feel like they were instrumental, if you think that they genuinely were, to your guys' success? And I don't want to hear the thing that like what we were talking about earlier, you shouldn't say anything because you feel like you have to. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, like they feel like they have to, and they're going through the motions of saying, oh yeah, thanks to my wife or my partner,
right?
Because that's what I'm supposed to do and supposed to say. But how has your partners directly contributed into your success specifically?
I can say, like, first off, I think their belief, right? Like, you cannot build a business. You can, but your partner's either there being a cheerleader and encouraging you to keep going through the struggles, or they're not. I guess they could be just neutral and don't care at all. But I think when you're going through tough times and you've got someone there who's like in your corner, like, you've got this, you power through a lot. And I can tell you, like, when our relationship's really good, like, I just feel like I'm invincible. No matter how hard things get, like, I got something super solid to fall back on. Tim Ferriss talks about, know your worst case scenario. So my worst case scenario is I'm living in the basement of my mother-in-law's house. And once again, I'm like, is that bad? No. As long as I've got a good relationship with my wife and kids, not bad at all. In Tony Robbins' event, we did this exercise where you're trying to, like, you write down certain things you want to change in your life, and then you think about the worst case scenario, the worst things that could possibly be. And it was like my wife leaving me, my kids not wanting to be with me. I didn't think anything about losing money or business. That wasn't even I wasn't part of it. And so, truly, like, to feel fulfilled in the accomplishment of business, I think feeling like you're a success at home and at business compound against each other, and you just feel more fulfilled on both. And I think that's a powerful place to be.
You feel like Joanna's been that for you?
Luckily, yeah, like, huge. It's been huge for sure. Because there's been a few small times where, like, we've been out of sorts, and man, it's so challenging, and luckily I feel like that's been very, very, very few times, because there's been a lot of struggle I've gone through, and I always can go home and know I've got someone awesome to be with. And it's like, I can brush the hard stuff to tomorrow, and I can go home and enjoy my kids and enjoy my wife and feel loved and appreciated, and I think that's a powerful thing to have.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so my wife Andrea, she's been just an absolute bedrock for me. She's been given a lot of opportunities to not support me, and where most people would have probably checked out, right? I mean, imagine your father gives your spouse millions of dollars or $1 million to invest in their business and he loses it, right? And,
What an a-hole.
she had an opportunity to be like, no, I support my dad in this, but she always stood by my side. She believed in me. She was always just stalwart. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way that she was raised and going back to like standards and, sharing in not just interest, but in principles. What did I say earlier? There's a
Values.
values. Yeah. Just coming back to like shared values because, she grew up as a farm girl, one that probably doesn't question me as much or whatever else, but really just hardworking and everything else. And so she's just always been by my side through thick and thin and put first things first. And, when you find a spouse that balances you correctly, especially in an energy level, like the energy is enough. And what I mean by that is like, I think back to so many times when I was stressed out, crying myself to bed, just like literally, and just like being in her presence would balance out my energy and be a comfort. Where if I was alone during those times or with a negative energy or whatnot, like I can't imagine going through that without her. And she has always given me purpose. I wanted to get married at a very young age. I saved up for my diamond ring at the age of 12, and I knew that whoever was going to be my spouse, that I was going to be extremely dedicated to her. And so like that, Andrea has been that for me, just the person that has always given me purpose, meaning, life, direction, support. We don't always get along. Like I said, there's many times that we don't like each other, right? And many times that we don't share common interests. But at the end of the day, I know that she has always been there for me. And it's like I said, it's not just some like one-off gratitude. Like she has been through hell and back. We've moved 14 times during our marriage. 14 times. Most people can't ever say that over a lifetime. And she's raised our children a lot of times probably as a single mother. And those kids give me so much meaning, so much hope, so much desire and direction. And like that's been it for me.
That's awesome.
I think something that's powerful too is you're working as a partnership, right, in the business. I think also reflects on like how a person is in their personal relationship. And so, a lot of people ask like, how do you find a partner or whatnot? And I think it's important to see like, how do they treat their other relationships? If they're not, fighting for their relationships, they're probably not going to fight for the partnership. Because I think in business, like you come across a lot of challenges, right? Things are unfair. Things are not equal. Things are like get hard. Doubt creeps in. We've been partners for just as long as we've been married, right? And it's like we've had the relationship, go through a lot of ups and downs. And I think, the reason we've worked through a lot of those things is because we're dedicated to we value relationships. We value our spouses. We value our children. And we value each other. And so, it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking like,
the old, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Exactly.
Awesome
cool
stuff. Levi, tell us what commitment level, where you at?
Are you
what,
really
what
committed?
What are you taking? What are you taking home from this episode, my man?
Dude, there's a lot. I've only been married a couple of years. I've been with my wife for 4 years now. So there's still a lot of learning that I've got and a lot of mistakes that I've made. But what's cool is, hearing your guys' experiences and understanding and having perspective of time is that you guys are still figuring it out with your relationships. Like nobody's got it actually all figured out.
Never do.
And you guys are a lot older than me.
I know, like 5 years older.
Yeah, not that much. But yeah, it's cool to hear you guys' experiences from, you know, a younger entrepreneur and a younger married person, and to hear that I'm not in a bad place. I'm exactly where I need to be, you know?
One important point you bring up is you're always changing as individuals.
Yeah.
Right? In a partnership, in marriage, your kids are constantly changing. And I think like if you're not changing as well, if you're not finding ways to change the relationship, right? Because they say like I don't know, you hear all kinds of different terms like the 7-year itch or, you know, how people get divorced or whatever. Really what it comes down to is like in 7 years, you're two completely different people. And if you're operating on the same agreements that you started with, like those agreements usually no longer work in the relationship. And so, you know, one of the things you talked about communication, I think it's so important to like realize like, hey, we need to renegotiate this relationship. You know, what do you value now that you didn't then, or what's your priority look like? These are my priorities, and understand how those shift and change over time, because they do. Mm-hmm. They just do. And acknowledge it. And that's why you say no one has it figured out, because I've never been in this role as a father raising teenagers. Like so many things have changed, and I'm a new person because of it. Yeah. Right. And who I'll be in 5 years from now will be a lot different as well. Well, that's the same thing with my spouse. And so our relationship has to change with all the changes in our lives. And I think as long as we're continually improving ourselves and focusing on continually improving our relationships, I think life has so much to offer.
I also think I've gathered too, in understanding, just listen to you guys and just reflect on my experiences. Like I think as an entrepreneur, my life would probably be easier if I was single, but it doesn't necessarily mean my life would be better.
That's right. You know, a lot of guys, they try to build a business and then build a family. You know, both Daryl and I have chose to build families and then build a business around it. And I would say there's nothing more fulfilling, because at the end of the day, what's the reason to build a business, mm-hmm. right? Like what's your why, what's your direction? And it is easy in a way to be single and go and do things. It's also a very lonely path and not very fulfilling. Few resources as we wrap up this podcast. We talked about a few of them, but there's a lot of really good courses and different things like that out there. So Keith Yackey was from one of our previous episodes. Go and check him out. He does a lot of relationship type coaching. It's called like Relationship Game or Couples Game. The Married Game.
Great guy.
Pretty solid. Leadership and Self-Deception was one of the most incredible books that ever read. Recently took a course and taking a course by Jennifer Finlayson Fife. She's got a lot of really good resources for individuals and couples. But there's a lot of any other resources that you would recommend for improving your relationship?
Gosh, so I just got to give one disclaimer. Okay, so like I love like working on becoming the better person. But my wife gave me kind of the realization that we can't have every vacation be a seminar or a this or that, right? And I absolutely love that stuff because it helps me think in something completely different than what I'm always thinking about. So make sure, like as you're pushing this stuff, don't push it on your spouse if they're not interested. Like do it yourself first. Make the changes that you learn about. And hopefully that inspires your wife to join or your spouse to join. But if initially they don't want to join, don't push it on them, because that can lead to more issues.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks. Until next time.